Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. It is time for the Monday Schmooze. Brought to you by Gatorade. Dave Revson, Nicole Auerbach, Howard Griffith. It was a fun week. It was an informative week. We're ready to go.
Yeah, it was actually, the games were more interesting than anticipated. We had a couple crazy final minute finishes across the landscape, and I do think we learned a lot, or have some questions at least.
We've got some questions answered, but there's still teams in the West that it's like, who are you? Would you like to tell us? Let us know.
The entire West may in fact fall into that category. We're going to get into everyone coming up here in the next hour. Our big story, as it is every Monday, the results from the weekend. The conference still has 4 unbeatens, 3 played this weekend. Michigan just crushed Nebraska. It was 28-0 at halftime. Penn State was tied with Northwestern at the break before they pulled away in the second half. Maryland's 5-0 for the first time in more than 20 years. They pounded Indiana. Iowa rallied late to top Michigan State, but lost QB Cade McNamara to what appeared to be a serious leg injury. So let's run through these, starting with the ranked teams. Michigan, we kind of wondered, hey, go on the road for the first time. Nebraska's got the best rush defense in the country. Perhaps this would be a competitive game. It was not even remotely competitive. 28-0 at the half, 14-0 after one quarter. Michigan ran it right through Nebraska. They shut down Nebraska's run game. This was the most complete effort we've seen from Michigan all year.
Absolutely. That's exactly what Michigan wants to be. This is exactly how they want to win a game, how they want to dominate a game, how they want to pull away in a game. And I think it was really impressive that they were obviously committed to the run against what had been the best rushing defense in the country. Obviously, they get almost 250 yards on the ground. But they were balanced. JJ was really good in the air, too. They didn't make mistakes and no penalties. It was just like a really clean game. And I think that it's what, 100% Michigan, that's what that looks like.
Talking about paying attention to detail, right? They're going out and handling their business. We said, okay, there are questions out there because we're concerned about the schedule. They're not. They just continue. And this has been a theme for the last 3 years. When you think about Michigan, people have talked about the non-conference. Can you throw it? Can you run it? There's always been some questions. But this game, they answered them all, right? You go on the road and still handle your opponent the way they did. And I can make the argument that there's probably still room to grow for this team. They still haven't probably maxed out on the offensive side. This is a dangerous team.
They look like they're having a ton of fun, too. You made a point. No penalties. Zero penalties.
Which apparently they hadn't done this century. Yeah. That's like a Dave stat. I saw that, and I was like, I'm going to steal that one.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable, right? To go into a place that is a hostile environment. You're on the road for the first time all year. I just think it kind of speaks volumes about where they are. And again, they look like a team that is having a great time. Their defense, totally dominant. Nebraska had the most rushing yards from the quarterback position of any team in the country. Yeah. Heinrich Haarberg got -2 rushing yards in this game.
It was just so clean. That's the thing. This was just on both sides of the ball what we expect from Michigan and what they want to do. We've seen Harbaugh happy about games that were slower starts and, not quite as impressive or complete, but this really was maximizing that.
It really is. And you got to give the coaches, obviously the players get the bulk of the credit, but this is really an impressive coaching staff that he's continued to put together and replace guys with, particularly on the defensive side. I mean, he has really got this program running the right way, in the right direction, and they're just playing at such a high level. It's hard to believe, that they're not considered the #1 team in the country.
There are some who consider them the #1 team. We'll get to that in just a bit. How about the Huskers? I thought this would be a more competitive game than it was from them. Look, it's year 1 under Matt Rule. Yeah. It was a mess that he inherited. But I was a little surprised. Maybe it says more about Michigan than it does about Nebraska. I felt like Nebraska was taken out of its game early because they got so far behind. They're really not comfortable throwing the ball as much as they had to in this game, and perhaps that explains a lot.
I do believe it's more about Michigan, right, because they're just so talented. But this is a Husker program that's going to take some time to rebuild, to reboot. All of the adjectives that you could come up with, it's going to take some time. But he's really positive about the direction. And we know the way they want to play. You just can't play that way against the best teams, one of the best teams in the country. It's hard to be able to just run the football, be one-dimensional, and be able to have success. That's not really going to happen for them.
Yeah, and I think they played the right quarterback. And I think they're figuring out some things. It's just, again, there's levels to this and different talent in different parts of the league. And so I think that's going to be an issue. But I do think the overall idea of defense, running the football, running with your quarterback, that's going to win them games in the Big Ten as they continue to get better.
I want to jump to Rutgers because that's what Rutgers is doing. Those two programs right now want to play the game the same way. And you're seeing the success that Rutgers is having at this particular point. That's what we need to expect out of Nebraska.
And I know Nebraska fans hoping it doesn't take quite as long as it did.
That's fair.
With Rutgers, and they have some really good infrastructure in place there as they try to avoid making it a slow build. But you're right. I mean, similar, at least with what they've got right now, they're not going to throw the ball all over the joint. They want to run it.
Which is
play.
okay. Knowing who you are is as big a part of this game as anything.
Good litmus test for them, I think, going to Illinois.
I was going to say, that type of style of play is going to work well in the West. A lot of these teams will be gettable, I think, for Nebraska.
Penn State went on the road to Northwestern. They were down for the first time all year. They turned it over for the first time all year on the opening kickoff. They trailed not once but twice. They hadn't trailed all season. And yet, in the second half, came out and really dominated the game. Their defense was unbelievable. It was so good. And I know Northwestern struggles offensively. I get it. But holy cow, was their defense good.
They lived in the backfield.
Yes.
That's what, it's so impressive just how often they were able to get back there. I think I wrote it down. Maybe I didn't. It was like seven tackles for loss.
And 12
sacks.
tackles for loss.
That's crazy. That's just a crazy number. And yes, even if a team is struggling offensively, you still were doing that in a game that was tight, that was close for a long time, and still does showcase what this defense wants to do. We've been talking a lot about how Manny Diaz is approaching these games and the philosophies and the style of play that he has. That's what you see when you see that much negative yardage for Northwestern. I was impressed at the response, certainly. Got some questions about the offense in the first half, but the defense was no questions.
It's like when they want to turn it on, they know how to turn it on. When they need to bring pressure, even if you're holding some things back because you believe that maybe you can be vanilla and be able to get into the backfield, they had to really start creating some things defensively to create that pressure because of what was going on offensively. And they did that. And I also think, quite frankly, I've been really impressed with Northwestern. I really have been.
Yeah. Last couple of weeks, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are playing so hard. And Penn State answered the questions, right? So this is just another one of those things. Well, what do you do when you go into an environment where it's believed that it's not going to be a hostile environment? Can you rise to that level? And they didn't early, right? But they came in, they got some things reassessed at halftime, and they came out firing on all cylinders. So that's a mark of a mature team. You like them to be able to start fast, but you need to give them a little something at halftime to get them going.
Are you guys concerned about the lack of explosion from the offense?
Yes.
I mean, so they have 12 plays of 20 yards or longer. It's tied for last in the Big Ten, interestingly, with Northwestern. They have one play longer than 40 yards this year. They had 17 last year.
We talked about this on Friday going into the game about how, hey, maybe there's some
This was the
opportunities.
day, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially long runs,
Yes.
those breakaway runs. And we haven't seen that this year. And again, they've been winning and maybe they haven't needed it. But I am shocked. Because of the talent, the type of play, but also just that we saw it last year with these same players.
Right. Yes, that Nicholas Singleton was running free in secondaries
all the time.
all last year. And I agree with what you said earlier, Howard. Let's give some credit to Northwestern, particularly Northwestern's defense. Yeah. They were in the right place. They tackled a lot better than they had been earlier in the year. So there is something to that. And again, I do think they deserve a ton of credit. But it feels like if you're going to nitpick a little bit, and when you get to the level that Penn State's at, you do nitpick a little bit because we're talking about a team that wants to be in that college football playoff. It does feel like that part of it is missing a bit.
And here's what also is interesting about it. Coach Franklin's comments before the game was he wants to see more explosion.
Yes.
And
we're going to open it up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they weren't able to address that. But I got to be honest with you. In years past, we'd see these explosive plays, but they weren't able to run the ball with the consistency or weren't
Right.
throwing it with the consistency. What they're doing now is consistent. So maybe it's what defenses are trying to. They don't want to give up the big play. They're playing maybe more of a sound defense when they go against Penn State because of the weapons that they have. They're just not letting people get behind them. But you want to be able to see it. You need to be able to know that they can score in a heartbeat.
It was interesting because we could see them run off these, like a 30-yard run or whatever, but we didn't know, right? 3rd and 2. Could they get that, right?
Right.
We had questions
Yeah.
about the offensive line.
Now they can get
Now they can
Now
do
they-
that. So, but that's to your point. That is to
great
your point. So that is something that you feel good about,
Yeah.
that you can get the yardage when you need it, but it's coming at the cost of maybe some of these breakaway runs.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've seen a lot of the T formation at the
How
goal
fickle
line.
are we? Just think about this for
Yeah.
a moment, right? They couldn't get 3rd and 1,
Right.
4th and 1. They'd
Right.
struggle.
Now they can.
And we complain about it. And now they're not getting the 30, 40 yard, and we're complaining
That's
about
our jobs. We nitpick. We nitpick, guys.
Love
That's
it.
our job.
It's in the description somewhere. No, look, it is a fascinating team because this team feels like one. I mean, that defense, you can put that defense up against anyone in America,
Yeah.
and they're going to have a really hard time with them. So if you're good enough offensively, you're
Yeah.
going to be in that conversation all year.
Yes, and that's going to be tested very soon.
It
a
is.
couple weeks.
Yeah. You got Ohio State. You got the bye week, UMass, and then Ohio State. So we will know here really soon about them. We're going to know really soon about Maryland too. Like this week, we'll know about them against Ohio State. But man, I mean, this was an utter annihilation against Indiana. Mia Tagovailoa had as good a game as you could have. I mean, accounting for 6 touchdowns in this game. And their defense, again, I know Indiana fired Walt Bell yesterday, so there's some dissatisfaction with Indiana's offense. But man, Maryland's defense seems legit.
I think the most impressive thing that we've seen from Maryland this year is we talked about the slow starts and non-conference play, but they're putting teams away. Like, there's just no doubt. They're not letting them back in games. They're not making mistakes defensively that we've seen them make in past years that have allowed them or required Leah to have some heroics and maybe force a ball, and then we see some turnovers. But they are really soundly beating teams that they should, and that's where, like, we look at them taking the next step, and obviously we're going to learn a lot this week.
Right.
But I don't know that they would win these games the way that they've won them without that improvement on the defensive side and then the balance on the offense. But they've had games they've leaned on the passing game or the run game. Like, it's all smooth, it feels.
It really does. And when I think about Maryland, I just think about the maturity process that this program has gone through and the growth that they've had. And yes, they'd go out and score a bunch of points, but they'd also give up a bunch of points, right? We're now seeing a team that's really solid and understands who they are. And you talk about the slow starts. They got off to a fast start, which was great. And you talk about putting them away. This is another one of those coaching staffs, right? And the confidence that Coach Loxley has in his staff and this team right now is evident when he speaks, right? And it's really impressive to watch because for me, I look at it like there's always so much pressure, so much scrutiny that coaches are under by their own institution, right? This is what it looks like when you have the confidence of your institution. You're able to just go out and make changes. He's made changes to this coaching staff really quickly when things haven't worked.
Yes.
He's gone and gotten the players that he's needed to get, and they've been able to play for him. So this is really a confident team, and I like where they are, right? Because now we see them in this position where can they get Ohio State? Can they get Penn State? Can they get Michigan?
They're going to get one of them.
Right.
They're going to get one of them this year.
You
They're
think they'll be
poised.
one of those
I
three
do.
teams?
Yeah.
They're
I've been thinking
poised.
that since the preseason, and nothing we've seen through the first month has given me pause about that. On that point, how great was the halftime interview?
What a smile.
Good.
So good.
But also, like,
Yeah.
that's the attention to detail,
Yeah. Yeah.
the little things, Terps not beating Terps.
Yep.
It was great. And then he was much more happy at the end of the season.
He was.
It was so good,
The
though.
contrast with the halftime
Yeah.
interview, she did an amazing job.
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah,
After that
she
follow-up.
asked him for a smile,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he
Right,
gave us the eye
absolutely.
roll.
Here you go.
Incredible.
Hats off. I
So
mean,
good.
Elise Menaker's fabulous,
Yeah.
but it was really good, and he reacted wonderfully. But if you would have said to me that the team with the longest streak of giving up 20 or fewer points in the nation was going to be Maryland, If you would have said that 2 years ago,
Yeah, no idea.
You would have said that's absurd, right?
Right.
Like this defense is so much better than it was. The offensive line is so much better than it was. But we're going to get a real test here.
Right.
If you can go into the shoe and you can either give Ohio State a really good game, or Nicole thinks
Maybe
maybe
get one of them. I
Yeah.
think they're going to get one of them.
Yeah.
And where they need to be, and I know it's early in the week, but no Terps beating Terps. That's how they win, or are able to be in this game in the fourth quarter.
Right. Real quick on Indiana, Walt Bell let go as offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
It just feels like they haven't really solved many issues. The Indiana State game gave us some hope. I thought the second half of the Louisville game did as well, but otherwise this offense has been stuck in the mud.
Yeah, we've been trying to see what they wanted to play, right? And we had it under wraps. We thought what we were going to see, more option games, and that really hasn't necessarily come to fruition. But they've just got to find a way to jumpstart this thing and get going, and hopefully Carey, Coach Carey, people know a lot from Northern Illinois, really had success there and then went on to Temple. Maybe he can get things going. He's been working with the quarterbacks as well, so maybe he has a better feel.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you bring in experienced people in those analyst positions for something like this. But you're right, they have to figure out who they want to be. And this job is only going to get harder when you add in the teams that we're going to be adding next year into the Big Ten. So you do have to figure out, again, that identity, what style of play you want to play, and then how you're going to do it and develop in this league to be able to be competitive.
Week off this week, so maybe kind of a hard reset. Then they go to Michigan the following week.
Yeah,
but,
no big deal.
But it gives you some time to at least kind of figure it out. Brendan Sorsby was a little bit better when he came in, led a couple touchdown drives. Maybe you reconsider that. Remember, he won the job coming out of camp, or at least got the started in the opener. So pretty interesting stuff there. Interesting stuff in Iowa City as well. You were there.
Yes.
So we're looking for a first-hand account here. This was a game, it looked like Michigan State might win. I mean, they were ahead most of the way, and then Iowa scored 13 points in the final 5 or 6 minutes to win the game. And, of course, it is sparked by special teams and sparked by defense. Losing Cade McNamara, a huge blow, though.
Yeah, although that happened early in the game, and I thought they responded really well.
Right, no, I mean a huge blow, kind of more globally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But even within the game, I thought that could have been something more damaging. I thought Michigan State's defense played well enough to win that game. Cal Haladay particularly was really, really good. But yeah, it was just such an Iowa win, right? The
archetype of the Iowa win.
Yes, a bunch of field goals, a punt return touchdown. It was exactly that. And of course, that was the game-changing moment and ultimately what got them the win. But, I think that hopefully that gives you some sort of momentum. There was some play calling questions I had about, settling for a field goal, and then you have that, right? And it kind of changes some things. But again, I actually came away pretty impressed with Michigan State. I think it would have been really easy for them to kind of shut down with the way the season has gone. And I think it was good for them to get on the road, get out of there. And again, the defense did a really good job. Noah Kim needs to stop turning the ball over, but the defense played well enough to win the game.
You talk about turning the football over, you can't do it. Right, you go on the road, try to do it in the house of horrors that is Iowa City at night. Right, it's not a great recipe for success, and I think it's probably a little easier to get them going defensively, right? Because Harlan Barnett is a defensive guy. He's been a defensive coordinator before. Now he's taken over, so it's probably easier for that side of the ball to be able to get up to speed. But this offense has got to put themselves in a situation where they can win some games.
They have 2 offensive touchdowns in the last 12 quarters. To your point, 9 turnovers in the last 2 games. I mean, you just flat out can't win games that way. But it was, and especially with some of the stuff that was swirling with the NIL earlier in the day. I mean, there's a lot going on with that group. And to your point, they
played well.
They showed up.
Yeah, they did show up.
Played well and had every chance to win the game in the fourth quarter. Howard alluded to this off the top, but it is shaping up to be another wide open race in the Big Ten West. Wisconsin is the only team that's yet to lose a conference game, and they've only played 1. 4 other teams with 1 win, and then Illinois and Nebraska 0-2 in conference play. And I mentioned those 2 will meet Friday night in Champaign, and the Illini will be licking their wounds. They got pounded by Purdue. Let's accentuate the positive first. The Boilers were really good in this one, Howard.
They really have. I mean, you were really kind of wondering where they would be offensively. But Graham Harrell is going to stress defense. He's really done an outstanding job, and Card is really, when he's on, he is on. And he will pull it down and run, extend drives as well with his legs. This was really impressive. And listen, I know Illinois is struggling for a myriad of reasons, but this Purdue game was really outstanding. I really like the way they're playing right now.
I don't think I thought that either of these teams would come close to 44 points. And that what was really impressive was once they stepped on the gas, they stayed and they just kept scoring. And you saw it in the run game, you saw it in the pass game. Everything started to work, and there was just the confidence was building and building. And I think we've been waiting to see this, right? We've had high expectations for Graham Harrell to accompany which should be a good defense. And so I thought it was incredibly encouraging. It was one of my biggest takeaways from the weekend, actually, was how well Purdue played.
Yes, did not see 44-19 coming at all. Thought this was going to be a really competitive game. It was interesting that Ryan Walters revealed afterward that he called the defense for the first time this year. And one of the great mysteries coming into this game was Illinois and Purdue had the two worst defenses in the Big Ten. Purdue, of course, had hired a defensive mastermind in Ryan Walters, and he had masterminded the best defense in the country last year at Illinois, and now they were both struggling mightily. Whether or not this was a byproduct of Illinois' offensive issues or whether maybe this is the new solution, hard to say, but there was a significant difference in how that defense looked with Walters calling it.
Well, I think you have to give him a lot of credit, too, that he didn't take over the play calling defensively earlier than he did.
Right.
I mean,
to give it a chance.
Right. He really empowered his assistant coaches to go do what they needed to do. But at some point, you wonder whether you're an offensive guy or a defensive guy, if your team is struggling in that area, do you take over? And he's clearly been able to take over. So that's going to take a little bit of the stress and pressure away from having to make sure he's got to control the entire team. He still does, obviously being the head coach, but he's able to focus in on his defense. And as he told me last year when he was at Illinois, I mean, this is a hard defense really for someone to learn right away. The way he calls the games, it's a feel for him. So it takes some time. And I'm not saying Aaron Henry won't ultimately figure it out at Illinois, but it takes time when you become a play caller on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, and I think it's really interesting to then take it over back because for a first-time head coach to be walking in that situation, you do have so many other things you have to do as the CEO and so many hats you have to wear that we do see coaches tend to give that up because it is really hard to be that involved in the weeds and even during a game on decisions when you are also the head coach and responsible for the other side of the ball too. So that was impressive that it worked so well.
Well, I think it's important that you also have a strong offensive coordinator, right, that can understand all the things that you need to tackle.
Right, and you and Jerry talk about this. It's harder to call a defense than it is to call an offense. And so that, extra level of difficulty there. I'm interested in what you see here from Illinois. This was a team that, again, I don't want to beat this because I still think that somehow they're going to figure it out. Maybe I'm deluding myself, but man, I thought they were good when we were at practice in the preseason, but they really don't have any answers on defense, particularly in the back end, despite having two All-Americans up front on defense. And offense, they only had the one turnover. It really cost them. But there just isn't a whole lot of flow on the offensive end.
They're not running the ball with the efficiency that they did last year, and that was really one of their calling cards. You knew that they were going to be able to run the football and salt the game away. Now you can't do that, so now you're forced to put the ball up, and sometimes bad things happen if you're not taking care of, protecting the quarterback and opening things up. But defensively, I just think it's going to take time. It really is. Ryan Walters was not the genius that we all believe he is. His team wasn't playing like that when he was first-time defensive coordinator. It just takes time wherever you go, and Aaron Henry is going through that time, and he's playing some young guys on the back end as well. Some true freshmen that are playing and played well the week before, but then all of a sudden you're going into an offensive game plan where the coordinator on the other side wants to scheme you up as well and try to put those defensive players in conflict, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I think what's been interesting, though, is the struggles up front, right? And the fact that they gave up almost 7 yards per play on the ground. Like, that's where it should be the strength, should be able to set the tone. We do have questions, and they're young on the back end. And I think that's probably the most surprising part of what we've seen from Illinois defensively is that I thought that front would just dominate.
And I think also, as you grow, you're learning how to win close games. You got to learn to be a front runner as well. I mean, it's tough. When you open the season, people were pointing at Illinois being really good. This is defense, offensive line, really good, right? And you got to learn to play with
Guilty as
this.
charged.
We all are. We all are. So they're going to have to play their way through this thing and get things corrected. But it comes down to ultimately fundamentals.
Yeah.
It's a huge game on Friday, right? Huge game at home against Nebraska.
Yep.
Again, the other team in the division that hasn't won a game. This is one you got to win. What about Minnesota? They bounced back, I thought, pretty nicely against Louisiana. Louisiana is a good Group of 5 team. The quarterback, Chris, was so impressive. You're down at the half. I think we were sitting in studio and thinking, oh, man, like there's a
problem.
There is a chance they lose this game.
There was.
Yeah, and then really responded in the second half.
Yeah, I think that they learned something about themselves in the way that they responded after the collapse the week prior. But I agree. I mean, PJ Fleck talked about this after the game. Like, that is a team that's going to win a lot of games in the Sun Belt. But Minnesota did respond. They did figure some things out. There were some nice moments in the passing game, right? We've been waiting to see that from Ethan Kaliakmanis. I thought that they learned a lot about the response and not giving up in that game and responding after a collapse. Maybe it helped, actually, that they were in a dogfight and that they needed to fight back, and they were down a few times in that game, down at the half. But I think you could tell with the way PJ talked about it afterwards that they needed to grind through a game like that, and that they feel better having gone through it.
And he's talked about it. You know, they're playing some young guys as well, right?
Yes.
I mean, you rarely hear him say that. But they're just not clicking right now. We know how good this, and we expect this defense to be dominant as well, but it hasn't necessarily been that way. So I think it's just another process that they're having to go through. But they've got to get things going more consistently, start fast, and be something that really, I think, will address some of their issues down the line.
Right. I mean, Louisiana more than 7 yards per play, and Minnesota had 1 tackle for loss. And you're playing Michigan this week. So the bar raises significantly. But again, this is a game that you could have lost. And it's a good team, and that is a team that will beat some power, that can give Power 5 teams real trouble.
And as long as that quarterback's healthy, woo-hoo.
Yeah, no, he's good. He's good. But I'm with you. Kaliakmanis encouraging Daniel Jackson emerging as his clear-cut number 1 receiver. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Rutgers, it's hard to read too much into the game against Wagner other than this is what a game against Wagner is supposed to look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. When I watch this team, I just want to know: are they playing hard? Right? Are they making mistakes? If they're not making mistakes, they're where they should be right now, and they want to continue to build this program. It's a process and a time, and it's going to take even more time. But when the games are supposed to, the way they want it is impressive.
I completely agree, and I think they are doing what they needed to do in the non-conference. They have won games convincingly, and this was one that was going to be an easier day, I think, but they did what they needed to do. It's a tune-up. They're going into their bigger games, but they're also now only 2 games away from bowl eligibility.
That's the key.
Massive, because, again, there's winnable games on the schedule. Like, how many years have we talked about Rutgers and Maryland and just how much of a struggle it was, how much of the season was a slog? We feel really good about where both of these teams are, but certainly, obviously, Rutgers wants to do more than just play for a bowl, but definitely going to be playing for a bowl, I think.
I wouldn't be remotely surprised if they've wrapped up a bowl game in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they go to Wisconsin, and that's going to be a very challenging game.
But that's a winnable game, I think.
And then Michigan State and Indiana.
Yeah.
The next 2. I mean, those are games where as you start to kind of gauge, hey, how have we done here measuring up against the middle of
but I even think Wisconsin. I think that's a really interesting matchup for them this year.
Where is your program? Right. This is where you measure where your program is in this little stretch here to get to bowl eligibility and even better.
In October.
Yeah, I know. It's a really positive vibe around that Rutgers program right now, no doubt. Status brought to you by Gatorade, the Big Ten boasting 3 of the top 5 scoring defenses in the nation 5 weeks in. Michigan is leading the way. They're followed by Ohio State and Penn State. Remember, this is a Buckeyes team that finished 24th nationally in scoring D a season ago, so a significant jump early for Jim Knowles' unit. They will get a good test this week. They take on Maryland, as we alluded to earlier. That is a team that is averaging 39 points per game. Thoughts on the Buckeyes coming off the win over Notre Dame and then the bye?
Yeah, well, it was well-timed, right? I mean, you come off of the best win anyone has this season, and they really felt good about it, and the physicality that they showed late. I think, their schedule is a little bit different than the other two, right? About like the way that their big games fall, and that Maryland is falling right now is really interesting because of the way that they're going to stress the defense in similar ways we thought Sam Hartman was. But the Buckeyes were really effective against it, and they slowed that game down. I thought that game was going to be way more high scoring than it ended up being in South Bend. This game's going to be at home, but they are going to be tested in the areas that we actually really want to learn a lot about their defense because of the way that Leah throws the ball around.
Talking about giving up big plays, well, this Ohio State team.
Yeah. Haven't given up one play.
Not doing
40 yards or longer, right? Yeah.
Notre Dame tried to take them deep a couple times.
Yep.
To no avail. Really weren't able to make some things happen in that area. But this is a Maryland team that's going to push the ball.
Yeah.
They're going to push it, so it's going to be incumbent on that front four really to keep them contained, not to allow those drives to be extended. But this is going to be a really interesting game, right? And you talk about all the hype and the energy that Coach Day showed us a couple of weeks ago after the huge win. How does that carry over, right? Do they feel like, okay, we're where we need to be, offense, defensively? They probably have more work to do, but I think this is going to be an outstanding test, particularly for the defense.
Yeah. Has the feud ended? Has both sides, has Lou Holtz
I don't know.
decided to stop
I'm not
talking
sure
about
we are on
Ohio
that.
State? Because that stretched into the bye week. That didn't get all the way into the bye week.
I want to correct 0 plays of 40 yards or longer, by the way, given up by Ohio State. Maryland has the most plays of 40 yards or longer in the Big Ten. This is it, right? This is, I'm not saying this is the ultimate game, although I think Maryland has a good chance to.
It's a great opponent.
No doubt. But if you think about where did Ohio State struggle last year? It was against explosive offenses.
Yep.
And so can you slow down what I don't think anyone would dispute as an explosive offense? And then how do you fare against what we've already outlined is a vastly improved defense? So I think this is a great game and a great test for them, with then Penn State looming a couple weeks later.
Absolutely. The one thing that's missing, a little ranking next to Maryland's name.
I was surprised.
I am shocked that Maryland is not ranked.
I was looking at the bottom of the poll, and there weren't really a ton of teams that lost, but again, that's how people do the polls.
Yep.
I don't want. There are words you could use to describe it, but to me, you should start with a blank slate every week and look at how teams are playing. I don't think there's any doubt Maryland's one of the top 25 teams in the country. I was surprised that they did end up there. What about Wisconsin? I will say, beating Purdue, that looks better after this weekend. They do have the loss to Washington State. The weird thing to me about the Badgers is, for all of the talk of the air raid attack, they have 2 passing touchdowns, the fewest in the Power 5.
Maybe they enjoyed that we all kind of built up the air raid and really talked that up, and they were like, no, we do have running backs. We have the run game. We're going to rely on that. Obviously, Ches Malusi gets hurt in that Purdue game, and that's going to change some things. But they still have Braylon Allen, so maybe the workload goes more to him. But that's why I think this is going to be a really interesting game, because we just talked about how high we are on Rutgers and where their strengths are, especially defensively. They can stop the run. They can be that type of defense. Yeah. Who is going to control this game, and where is the game going to be won, is going to be a really interesting part of this. And I do think, again, after you go through a big injury, having a bye is probably very helpful, because you got to tweak some things.
Yeah, having an opportunity for them to do some self-scouting, right? Because I still believe that on both sides of the ball, they're not necessarily doing what they will see them do in a couple of years, right? They're playing to the strengths of the team that they have right now and the personnel, which is absolutely the right thing to do. So there's some growing pains to go through that, but I think they'll make some adjustments on the defensive side, probably is where they need to make those adjustments and to start to play a lot better, because they're going to run the ball. I mean, this might be one of those games where the run totals are going to be through the roof for both teams.
Might be done in 3 hours.
But also very few passes, possibly.
Yeah. But it is interesting to see. I mean, Wisconsin's 12th in the Big Ten in total defense. I mean, you just don't think that's where they'd be. And again, as you talked about, you're installing a new system. Mike Tressel coming in. There are some similarities, and they told us in the preseason there's some carryover.
But let's think about
still,
this. They're really not installing a new system, right? The coaches had to adapt to the system that they're running right now.
Yeah.
So that to me is the growth process that they're trying to do, along with trying to say, well, this is what we're accustomed to, this is what we know is successful, but we need to put the players first. And that's what they're doing, but it's taking some time.
Sneaky good game. I think we all agree, sneaky good game.
Yeah. No, I've been looking forward to this one for a few weeks because, like we said with Rutgers, who are you?
Yes.
Where are you? Where do you rank in the pecking order? And this is a really good game to figure that out.
We're going to learn. We're going to learn a lot in that game this weekend. Time to go around the Big Ten. We had a huge upset in field hockey this weekend as 11th-ranked Ohio State knocked off undefeated top-ranked Iowa 2-1 in Iowa City. It was the Buckeyes' first win in program history over a number 1 ranked team. OSU is now 11-2 on the season. They'll face 16th-ranked Penn State on the road Friday. You can see that on Big Ten Plus. In women's volleyball, number 1 Wisconsin swept Michigan yesterday. Now 22 straight Big Ten wins for them. The top-ranked Badgers are 13-0. Up next is Iowa on the road Wednesday. That matchup televised here on the Big Ten Network. Nebraska also improved to 13-0 after picking up road wins over 17th-ranked Purdue as well as Indiana. This is the best start for the Huskers since 2008. The number 2 ranked team in the country will go on the road this weekend. They face Michigan State and Michigan on Friday and Saturday, respectively. Back to football we go. Big picture, checking out the latest AP Top 10. The top 7 are still the same. What's interesting, though, is that 5 different teams received at least one first-place vote. Now, there were 6 who got a first-place vote last week. Michigan got 12 number 1 votes this week after just 1 the previous week. Texas added 8 first-place votes after pounding Kansas. This is going to be a great race. I feel like sometimes we get to this point in the season and the discussion is who's the 4th team?
Yep.
Or we already know 2 teams.
Yeah.
Who are the other 2? I would argue I don't think we know any of them at this point. I mean, I don't feel positive. Maybe you guys disagree. But I don't feel certain that any team is going to be in that Final 4 right now. So I guess I'm going to put it to you this way. Who do you believe in nationally? Like, who are the teams? If somebody said to you, Nicole, tell me your best guess of someone who's going to be there, who would you say?
Okay, so I am with you in that it is very hard to predict because you can't write off a conference. Sometimes we can do that by now, right?
Yeah.
The Pac-12 has
Right.
been left out a lot.
Yeah.
There's a
Certainly not writing them off.
bunch of Pac-12 teams
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
alive in this. Texas looks really good, so maybe you can. They've got the Red River game this week, and that's kind of it. So maybe then at that point we could pencil them in. Florida State, clear path as well. But a team that I don't trust right now, which is weird to say, is Georgia. I am shocked that they are still number 1 in the country. I just don't think that they've done anything that has been impressive. They could have lost this past week. They've had really, really sluggish starts to the point where I don't even think we should say that they're sluggish starts. I think that's just who they are, that they have these games that just are not that impressive. It takes them a long time to get going. They are fortunate that they have Brock Bowers. He basically
He is
single-handedly,
crazy.
he is unbelievably good.
So good.
But, there has been a drop-off in areas that I don't know that we necessarily expected from Georgia. So I don't know if I trust them right now. And the SEC is down a bit. The middle of the SEC is down. So I don't know how much I've learned about them so far. I would put other teams, and I would consider like 3
Like
other
who?
teams.
Who?
Okay. Washington could be
yeah.
one. I think, they struggled a little bit in the desert this week, but they've done that before. They've looked the part. We've
Yep.
seen them, certainly. Florida State, I think resume. I know you disagree with me on that.
Well, it's not I disagree. I just think the LSU thing is.
Well, LSU now has 2 losses. So, right. So that could take some shine.
Yeah.
Texas's win over Alabama is looking better as Alabama has improved through the season. So I think you could go with all of them. And you know what? You could also make a case for Michigan or Ohio State.
Right.
Ohio State.
Or Penn State.
Yeah.
Or Penn State. But Ohio
Yeah.
State, great win, the win over Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
And then you've got Michigan, who, again, we talked about the completeness of this team. You could ding them for the resume, but the reason they got all those extra first-place votes is because they certainly looked the part this week.
Yeah, there was a little discussion in our green room. Certainly, as Georgia was struggling with Auburn, like, hey, if this game goes into overtime,
Right.
or if Georgia were to lose, obviously, then all bets are off. But if it goes into overtime and Georgia survives, does Michigan ascend to number 1?
Yeah, I think that the 3 teams in the Big Ten are all have an opportunity to be there because they're playing well. But I think when you step outside of the conference, I really like Texas. I mean, the talent that they've amassed there right now, it seems that they finally got things going, and I think they really have a good defense. What concerns me a little bit about the Pac-12 teams is defensively, right? But I'm also the one that'll sit here and tell you once you get in the playoffs, defense is out the window. because it's about
But you
scoring
need it
points.
to get there. Like
You do-
USC,
get
you
there.
do need it.
USC
You need to
needs
Okay.
to play better
So
defense.
that's a team that I would say I don't think we're going to see in the playoff. I
So
think
you'd
that
give, like,
defense-
Oregon or Washington
yes.
a better shot
I
than
think
USC.
Oregon and Washington are playing each other next week.
Right.
I think that's going to be the favorite to get there from this league. USC's defense is going to stop them from competing, from contending in the Pac-12 and for the playoff. The offense is fantastic, but that's just not going to. It didn't work last year. It didn't work with Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma teams. And so I think that's going to be. That's why I'm all in the Pacific Northwest. I think Oregon is maybe the better defensive team. So I know it's taken us this long to get to them,
Yeah.
but they might be the best team in the Pac-12. They might be the one that makes the playoff from there. And you also need to avoid kind of eating each other a little bit too much in the Pac-12.
I
to
do
make
worry
sure.
about that a
Yeah.
little. The league is so good,
Yeah.
and particularly, again, the teams that are coming to the Big Ten are just fabulous. But again, we're still talking about Oregon State and Washington State and some of these other teams that are really good too. So
It's fun.
That's the biggest thing. It's fun.
This is fun.
But we're in
Yes.
October and we don't know. We're talking about
Yes.
all of these teams,
Yeah.
and these are teams I think we all think could win a game in the playoff or win it all.
Well, someone in there who we've all agreed there's no one we totally believe in,
No.
right? And yet someone's going to win the national championship. So here we are. in
There's
the
so
first
many
week of
opportunities,
October.
and I think that's the best part of
Yeah,
it.
it's a fun
wide open.
season.
Yeah,
It's gonna
I think it's
continue.
great. I think it's really fun. Interesting way to usher out the
Yeah.
4-team playoff where you
Chaos.
yeah, it's
Total
all chaos.
chaos.